the International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Role of Coaches in Climate Action, Coaching Inside the Climate Crisis. We are so very happy that you've chosen to join us for this session that serves as the final day of our IAC Quo Vadis virtual conference for 2022, and also serves as a roundtable session of the JGSG, Joint Global Statement Group, comprised of 11 coaching associations around the globe. Welcome to all of you from all of our fellow coaching groups. I'm Brian Lowell French, author of Harmonic Leadership, and I serve on the Board of Governors of the IAC. And I'm very happy to introduce my co-moderator, Will James, team coach and the APECS Director of Inclusion and Sustainability. You want to say hi, Will?
Hi, what a privilege and a pleasure to be with you here today. So excited for this opportunity for us to together connect, to get confidence together, to confront our reality and to think about how we're going to commit to action. So thrilled to be here on behalf of APECS and to be meeting with you for what is going to be an energizing and inspiring conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. A reminder that we are providing translations for this session that you can access by clicking the translations button on the bottom of the toolbar, as you see on the slide share there, an icon that's in the shape of the world, very fitting for this conversation. And you can select either English, Spanish, French, or Chinese, and you'll hear the source language quietly in the background. But if you want, you can mute that source language if you prefer to just hear your translated language. We have a lot of information to share during the session, and you're going to hear from many experts. I did want to mention that we will be having some breakout rooms as well, so I will invite you to update your name display to place your preferred language as a prefix, either by saying EN for English, SP for Spanish, FR for French, or CH for Chinese. If you want to put that at the front of your name, as I have done, as Will has done, then we will know how to place you into the breakout rooms for your preferred language, so you can have a great conversation during that time. And as I said, we have a lot of information. It's a very packed session today. So I'm going to briefly introduce all of the wonderful people who you'll be hearing from today. I'll invite them to wave, and then you'll receive the full introduction later as they are presenting their parts. So first of all, you'll hear from Anjali Nair, the founder of the HR Studio and our current president of the IAC. You'll also hear from Eve Turner, coach and supervisor and author and founding member of the Climate Coaching Alliance, and she's representing APECS. You're also going to hear from our special guest, Professor Peter Hawkins, chairman of Renewal Associates and former president of APECS. Next, you'll hear from Charlie Marshall Gunu, who leads Afro Leadership, a Pan-African civil society organization based in Cameroon, and he is our IAC Africa Regional Coordinator. And you'll also hear from Gonzalo de la Canal, coach, consultant, and many other things, as you'll hear in his introduction, and he serves on the Board of Governors of the IAC. So now I'm going to invite Will to open up the session and to introduce our first speakers.
Thank you so much, Brian. Well, to begin with, we're going to have an opportunity to hear a little bit of context and background about the Joint Global Statement Group from Anjali and Eve, both people who I've had the honor and privilege of getting to know a bit these past months, and experiencing a bit of how they bring to their coaching intelligence a compassion, hope, and a sense of urgency for how we need to move forward. So over to you, Anjali and Eve.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you, Brian. And it's an honor to be here today. And I also wanted to say thank you because there are quite a few people on the call today representing all the bodies that you can see on your screen. And this is unique because 11 coaching bodies, which together we reckon represent maybe 300,000 coaches in the world, have got together because we recognize there is a climate and ecological emergency. And so you can see on the screen 11 bodies, and we are so grateful to the people here today. This is the first roundtable in a series of roundtables, and each will be run by 2 or 3 bodies. And today we're delighted at APECS to be partnering with Anjali and the IAC. I'd just like to say a little bit of context. In 2019, I read something on LinkedIn. I think it was something like July the 19th, and it really resonated with me. It was an open letter written by Linda Aspey, who I'm delighted is on this call today, Zoe Cohen, and the late Ali Wybrow. And what they did was they wrote a letter calling on coaches and coaching bodies and educators to recognise there was a climate emergency and to do something. And that really has sparked a lot of things. It was one of the factors that led to the creation of the Climate Coaching Alliance, which now has 2,200 members. But importantly, it started conversations. They were already happening in individual professional bodies, but it brought 11 professional bodies together. And why do we need to do this? Well, I'll just let you look at this for a moment. On the left-hand side, you can see 1971. And then on the far right-hand side, you can see 2022 this year. What Overshoot Day means, it's the day of the year by which we have used all the resources that the Earth can regenerate in a year. So if you go back 50 years, roughly we were using the amount of resources the Earth could regenerate in a year, if you see what I mean. Now move forward 50 years and you will see that by the end of July, we've used up all the resources the Earth can regenerate. And really, what will happen if that continues? And actually, the situation is even worse. If you go on the website for Earth Overshoot Day, it's very interesting because you can see where your country appears. If we all lived like the people in Qatar, by February the 10th, we'd have used all the resources the Earth could regenerate. On the other hand, if we lived in Ecuador, we wouldn't have used all the resources the Earth could regenerate until December the 6th. So that just gives us some context for why this is an emergency and why we're all involved in this, whether we like it or not. Anjali.
Thank you, Eve, and I'll just take the story further. So the fact remains that this is a wicked problem and it requires multiple stakeholders to collaborate for the future of humanity through innovative solutions and disrupting perhaps the way we think, act, interact, and engage with communities and the planet. And perhaps also invites us to hardwire green skills and capabilities in the current and future generations. So, you could look at it from 2 ends of the continuum, one with the loss, despair, and the sadness, to the other end of the continuum where there is hope and possibilities. We'd love to look at it from that lens because investing in the greener and more inclusive, human-centered approach is opening up immense opportunities. So this is a bold growth story. Shouldn't coaches be a part of this story? I'm just taking you through a little journey that we took as this group coming together. As Eve said, there was a trigger in 2019, there was a challenge, and JGSG came together to form one common voice aligned towards a goal. 2021 was an interesting year for us. We grew in strength with more organizations joining to be a part of this compelling journey to co-create resources for people we serve. And, when you look at, and it's beautiful to see, we see many of our colleagues have joined in today, and this is the spirit of collaboration and partnership. When we look at JGSG, there is, you could look at it operating from 4 dimensions. First, as individuals and as global citizens that we are. Then in our professional space as coaches, mentors, or supervisors in the way that we interact in our professional worlds. We're also professional bodies and we'd love to support who we serve. And this is the beauty of this collective professional bodies coming together. Our purpose is to create this collaborative space, not just to raise awareness, but also build capabilities to support professionals who would like to and would need to make this transition and navigate this transition. The coaching roundtable that you're in today is an outcome of many passionate discussions within the JGSG team over the last many, many months. And this space truly invites us to a common purpose while celebrating our individual uniqueness and diversity. So, on behalf of the entire JGSG team here, we welcome each one of you to sit around this table. And we invite you to this journey as professional community with this spirit of partnership and caring and lifelong learning. That's all I need, would like to put forward. Would really love to look at, what we get to towards the end of this. Enjoy the session, engage in the sessions, and we look forward to many more, as Eve said. Thank you, Brian. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eve. Thank you, Anjali. And this is so fitting that this session is taking place in the middle of COP27, the United Nations Conference of the Parties, happening from November 6th through 18 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And I encourage you to go and watch the videos, the opening ceremonies, many of the sessions. You can find so much of the information online, and it can inform us as coaches. And now I'm very, very excited to introduce our special guest today, Professor Peter Hawkins. I'm very honored to introduce you, Professor. And when I asked Peter how he would like to be introduced, he very humbly said to keep it short and simple by stating that he is a grandfather, gardener, and lifelong learner. And I paused and I thought, I need to say a little bit more. I just feel compelled because along with being these things, he's also a very prolific author, an absolute legend in the field of coaching. He's the chairman of Renewal Associates and emeritus professor of leadership at the Henley Business School at the University of Reading in the UK. His book, Leadership Team Coaching, now in the 4th edition, is the classic text on systemic team coaching. And he and Eve have co-authored another book titled Systemic Coaching, which focuses on ecological coaching. And later in the session, you'll hear more about the latest book that Peter and Eve and others have collaborated on and is soon to be published. Peter, welcome to the session, and we would love to hear about your personal journey into ecological focused coaching.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you all here today. And it's interesting, I think my journey echoes many others that I'll mention in the book, we'll talk about later. It's probably been slightly longer than most people's. From having had the blessing of being around for a long time. It started way back, I think, in the 70s, reading Rachel Carson, like many of my generation, Silent Spring, and then reading, and I had the privilege of hearing him live a couple of times, Gregory Bateson, who back in the 1970s was saying, unless we can shift the whole way we think, human consciousness, we don't have a snowball in hell's chance of surviving to the end of the 21st century. Now think about it, he was saying that in the 1970s, one of the great polymaths of the 20th century. He was saying we totally had misunderstood Darwin, that the unit of survival is never the individual, the team, the organization, the species. The unit of survival is always relational. It's the species in dynamic co-creation with their environmental niche, right? And I would say that the unit of well-being is never in the individual, the team, or the organization. It's always relational. So the person who destroys their ecological niche destroys themselves. And yet, like many people, I had a young family, late 70s or 80s. I ended up running a global consultancy, worrying about the mortgage. And you forget what's important. You get focused on the short term. You get focused on me and my people. And you forget that's the wrong thing to focus on. So, then I had several wake-up calls. I've been teaching leadership, strategy, culture change. I've been working with many organizations. And I often use this one sentence, which I say is the question you need to address strategy at whatever level. What can you uniquely do that the world of tomorrow needs? Great question for individuals, teams, organizations, countries, species. What can we uniquely do that the more than human world needs? Right? And I've been using it for many years, and then somebody said to me, just as 2010, I was just selling the consultancy I'd built up over many years. And they said, well, what's your answer, Peter? And I thought, what a good challenge. I had to go off on retreat for 3 days to answer my own question. And on that 3 days, I started to ask the question, which we're going to come to on this session. What would my grandchildren, if I live another 30 years, what would their challenge be to them? What would they be asking me about what I did in my life? And what would I say if they said, well, what were you doing when you were spending your time lecturing and impacting many people, working with many organizations around the world and governments? And what were you doing when you were leaving us, a world of greater demand, a world of greater expectations, and a world of diminishing resources, as Eve talked about earlier? What were you doing to prepare us for that world? And when I started to put myself in that position of my grandchildren 30 years from now, I realized, I could not look them in the eye doing what I was doing, right? I really had to really go back to what I knew here with my neocortex in the 1970s and start to say, how do I live that? How do I move that into my being, not just in my left hemisphere neocortex? And I realized I had to stop fundamentally seeing my coaches, the teams I worked with, the organizations I worked with as my clients, and try to get it right for them and ask them what they need. I needed to see them as my partner, both of us looking future back and outside in. What's the work we have to do together that the teams, the organizations, the stakeholders, the more than human world will benefit from the work we're doing? Fundamental shift that I think we still have a long way to go in coaching with, right? The coachee is not the client. And then, I went to South Africa, and I shared this story with you, Brian, and I was helping them develop a coaching culture across the Western Cape, right, in post-apartheid South Africa, with all the challenges, the townships, the diversity, the big ecological challenges. And we invited all the stakeholders in the room to come and comment on this. And I shall never forget this tall, black, young team leader standing up and saying, when I listen to your coaching culture, strategy, government, it sounds like the people with the big cars, the big offices, the big paychecks now get the big coaches. It sounds like, we had this at the beginning of the book that Eve and I wrote, he then went on to say, it sounds like coaching is very expensive personal development for the already highly privileged. And I thought, is that what I'm doing? Is that what the coaching profession is doing? Is that what we should be doing? And so if you like, the journey of the last 10 years with Eve, Ali Wide-Browd, Josie McLean, many others that Eve mentioned, has been about, well, how do we shift coaching to make its contribution, which is enormous potentially, to transforming human consciousness so that humans are fit to be on this planet for another 100 years. Because at the moment we're not future fit. And in that, we did, even I did quite a bit of research, and many people said, but how do we bring ecology into the coaching room? We've learned from our training. It's not our job to bring our agenda in. Increasingly, I say, well, what a strange way of thinking. It's that ecology is my agenda, right? I said to someone who said, it's not my job to bring ecology into the coaching room. I say, well, do your clients breathe? Do they eat? If they breathe and eat, and hopefully we all do, and drink, then the ecology is already in the room, right? It's just that we're not paying attention to it. We don't have to bring it in as an agenda item. We have to realize it's a partner. It's a player in every team meeting, in every conversation. We just have to wake up and think differently and change our frame. So that's in short my journey through this, which has meant that many things in my life I've had to really re-examine.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. I would love for you to share about the flowers sitting behind you, because I know there's special meaning behind the flowers.
Well, when we had the pandemic, Brian, and some of us got even busier, but flying around the world on Zoom, I thought, how do we? I made a commitment. I would never have a Zoom call without fresh flowers and something living. And I would say every coach, Eve does it as well. We should all have something living that means that when I'm looking at the screen and I see myself, I see something which reminds me we are just a very small part of a much bigger living world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You've inspired me. I've started doing coaching calls on my back porch I live on a green belt, so I have trees behind me. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how many people are commenting on, oh, that's beautiful. And I can sense the calm that is created from that, and the openness of conversation that is created from that simple change in setting.
And the nice thing is that my clients now bring me plants.
Oh, wonderful.
These were actually a gift from two supervisees.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, Peter, we're going to play a video now that I know is well known to you and loved by you. Would you like to give a little bit of opening to Drew's poem?
Yeah, it's a lovely, and it echoes what I was saying about the wake up from the grandchildren. It's a lovely poem by Drew Dellinger. And it's one that actually appears very early on in the book we will talk about later. It's let's go straight into it and let it speak for itself.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now. You will be able to hear the video and see the video.
And please listen to it with your heart.
Wonderful. It's a 2 minutes and 39-second video, and as Peter invited you to do, just really feel into this video. Here we go.
It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, and birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? I'm riding home on the coma train. I've got the voice of the Milky Way in my dreams. I have teams of scientists feeding me data daily, and pleading I immediately turn it into poetry. I want just this consciousness reached by people in range of secret frequencies contained in my speech. I am the desirous earth, equidistant to the underworld and the flesh of the stars. I am everything already lost. The moment the universe turns transparent and all the light shoots through the cosmos. I use words to instigate silence. I'm a hieroglyphic stairway in a buried Mayan city, suddenly exposed by a hurricane. A satellite circling Earth, finding dinosaur bones in the Gobi Desert. I am telescopes that see back in time. I am the precession of the equinoxes, the magnetism of the spiraling sea. I'm riding home on the Colma train, with the voice of the Milky Way in my dreams. I am myths where violets blossom from blood like dying and rising gods. I'm the boundary of time, soul encountering soul, and tongues of fire. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I can't sleep because my great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the earth was unraveling?
So powerful. I'm going to invite Will James on now to do a quick wrap of the video and then invite us into our breakout room. Will?
Thanks so much, Brian. So part of this process, as we're going to be thinking about more today, is how do we respond, and how do we deal with everything that connecting with what's going on in our reality stirs and awakens in us. And we want to take a little bit of time now to give you an opportunity in a breakout room to reflect on what that video means to you. So remember, the question there is, what will we say to our great-great-grandchildren when they ask, what did you do when the earth was unraveling? And I'll put a question into the chat now, but you're going to have 8 minutes in your breakout room to reflect with some peers around what does this awaken in you, what does it stir in you? And then we're going to have a few minutes after the end of the breakout room to have comments in the chat and to reflect on and sit with those comments together for a few minutes. So in a moment, you'll be swept into a breakout room, and I'll put the question for all of us into the chat now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. And I went ahead and posted that question into the chat for you. Note that when you do go into your breakout room, I believe your lines will be muted by default. So please unmute. Share your thoughts with your partners. The chat window will likely go away. Click chat, scroll to the bottom, and you'll find the question sitting there for you. All right, let's invite everyone to go into the breakout rooms. You'll see a little pop-up on your screen inviting you to enter into a room. Just click that. You'll see your screen flash briefly, and then you will join your colleagues in your designated room. Have a great discussion. And let's also spotlight Charlie, if we could.
And they are starting to get back.
Yes. So welcome back, everyone. We still have 18 seconds left on the breakout room, so we'll wait for the rest of the participants to join back.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we're down to 1 second, so let the system do its job on bringing everyone back into the main room. Okay, welcome back everyone from the breakout room. Hopefully you had a meaningful discussion, and I'm going to invite our colleague Charlie on now to lead the debrief to find out what you discussed. And we invite you to share your thoughts into the chat box. Charlie?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and welcome back to all of you. And we hope you had great insights from this reflection on how and what have we done when the world was unraveling. And if I will invite someone from Rec Room 1 to share the insight that they got there. Is there anyone from rec room 1 to share the insight? He will on mic and unmute and take the floor. So I will just share while waiting, I will share my insight here. And a few days back, I was traveling through Heathrow and I met someone from Tonga who was actually moving to COP27. And I will tell you that he said something that showed me that our session is a very critical session happening in a very critical time. He told me that they think like by 10, 15 years time, Tonga will be wiped out for the very high sea rise level they have there. And then I was very, very, very impressed, and it was frightening for me. So I will let the floor to Ingrid to express their thought. Over to you, Ingrid.
Yes, thank you. I was in the Spanish room, and what I heard from my colleagues was really inspiring. And I want to emphasize the fact of taking action ourselves first before even trying to change anyone else. And just by making first, even small steps count. And Mary was sharing how she, for example, picks up the garbage every time she goes out for a walk. And it's a small thing, but it makes a change. And also we talk how we can partner with HR managers in corporations to help bring this into companies more. So it was very inspiring. And then we were talking, but then the time was up.
Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. And also we have Steve sharing an initiative around climate coaches, with European Partnership Community. And this also shows how much this awareness around, sustainability or climate action is really, really spreading. And we need to do more about this. And who else? Maybe Liz, who is sharing awareness around to convince coaches around climate action. Liz, will you take the floor? No, and Lorenza was talking also about normalizing the conversation and around climate action. And so this is something that probably coaches should head into, to make sure we become all climate aware, to really include climate conversation around, in our coaching practices. I will give the floor, probably the last one, to Linda.
Thank you. Thank you, that's lovely. Yeah, I just want to pick up on normalizing. I think it's the question that every single time I meet coaches and therapists, actually, they say they don't know how to bring it into the room and they're worried about the agenda. And I think a lot of that is some assumptions that we're making that we as practitioners are always completely non-directive, which is a myth. Every question you ask takes somewhere you want them to go. So I think we have to just get over that, put our big girl and big boy pants on and start talking everywhere, in communities, with our neighbours, down the pub, at the sports club. We have to make ourselves feel stronger. We have to open our own window of tolerance to talking about these stuff. And then it just becomes much more natural in the coaching room when we're asking people about the systems they live and work in. Who else do we need to take into account? What are your stakeholders asking of you? As a leader, what new demands are you having to take on? Just ask systemic questions, and it cannot not come up. But we have to get comfortable and get past this. We've been asking this for 3 years now since we raised the alarm. We can't keep asking the same question. And if a coach was doing the same thing, a client was doing the same thing for 3 years, we'd say, is this working? It's not. Let's get past it.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. And I think for matter of time, I will certainly give back the floor to Brian to move on with the section. And I apologize to Liz and Catherine who have raised their hand. So Brian.
Thank you, Charlie. And Linda, I'm not sure if you saw, but you got a big thumbs up from Peter with your comments. Double thumbs up. There we go. Wonderful. And that's what I've been inspired to do as well. When I first met Peter, I shared that I've fallen into that trap of feeling inhibited, following the rules of traditional coaching. And now I'm feeling more free myself to voice the things that are in the room, and we just haven't been recognizing them. So, and speaking of that, I'm very excited to bring on our next speaker, Gonzalo Della Canal. He's with the IAC. He's an amazing person. He's from Uruguay. He's on the IAC Board of Governors. He's the chair of our school accreditation committee. And I encourage you to go out to our website and read his biography on the IAC administrative page, where you'll see that he has had a very interesting and exciting career, including being a sea vessel captain, an international business consultant, a university professor, and of course, a coach. And today we're going to be hearing from Gonzalo about how he used his coaching skills to help the fishing industry, government, and conservationists in Uruguay to come to an agreement on conservation of the fishery areas off the coast that were being affected by climate change and overfishing. So Gonzalo, we would love to hear your story of how you got involved and how coaching played such an important role on forming this agreement.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation for this meeting. Thank you for your time. Well, I define myself as an explorer. That's the reason why I've been doing many things in the way. The key thing that makes me involved and committed with the environmental issues was just see during my years on the sea how the sea was completely depleted of fishes, start to see the black waters that was completely depleted for the overfishing. And from there, I start to see how we are affecting the environment. And the reason why I was called it was for an experience that we got here about a conversation that was open just to try to get some agreement on how to start to renew our practice of fishing, more based on a local space. And the way that I get involved with it, it was not because I was a captain, not because I was a coach, not because I was a professor in the university. It was because I was committed and I was working as a volunteer during many years on every movement that was locally around the environment. And was just, okay, Gonzalo, you were captain, you were professor, you know how the things go. It's okay, let's add to the table. And then from the table, I proposed that just to start as a shadow coaching of the conversation, because one of the things that I always got as a motto, that all the problems exist without where is not a good conversation. It's a Thomas Leonard quote that I always kept with me. That quote, it was lead me, just focus me to where was the conversation missing, or where the conversation is missed, and divert on many things. So from the shadow coaching of that session, that I was not aware of many of the technical issues, also as the scientific development that was the scientific for my marine formation. I was able to catch up the conversation, to know what they are talking about, not specifically, but I was focused on what was missing on the conversation. What was the point that everyone wants to solve, and how they can contribute to this. So on this conversation, the main topics was at the end, the main was they were talking about the same. Everybody was concerned, but they were not looking on the needs of the others. So when we start to change in places and let the fishermen talk as a government, let the government talk as a fisherman, and let the scientific talk as the other part. So we change the roles and start to view the reality from different perspectives and try to defend each position and try to get a common solution on the ground. So this really helped us to make this conversation, get out of the box, get out of what is used to be everybody goes to the tables and put their position and defend their position. So on that time we can get an agreement that was validated for everyone and was understood for everyone and was supported for everyone. That was the experience that we got here. And the main thing is, I didn't involve as a coach. I bring the coach abilities to the conversation. That was the difference. I think the best way just to get involved with this is not going from my coaching position, but to get engaged with something that we all share, that is this blue dot in the sky.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And when Gonzalo and I were talking about his story, after hearing his story, I said, well, how long ago was that? And is the agreement still in place? And Gonzalo, you shared us about, 4 years ago, and the agreement is standing.
Yes, it's standing. Well, it has evolved. It was many other meetings, but those meetings were taken in another way, not in the way that just they were made in the adjustment needed for every part.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gonzalo, for sharing your story and using coaching skills in a group setting, group coaching, and inviting people to do perspective taking. Just such wonderful use of your coaching skills to help the planet. So thanks, Gonzalo. I'm going to turn it over to Will now to introduce our next segment.
Thank you, Brian. So thank you for that brilliant story and that invitation, that exhortation to get involved. Wasn't that a brilliant message from that story, to get involved? That's something that matters to all of us, this blue dot in the sky, and bring your coaching skills to that. And to speak to that, we have got now Peter Hawkins and Eve Turner to talk about the new book that is actually coming out tomorrow. They'll do a great job of talking about it, but just to say in introduction that so often a barrier to action is us knowing where to start, how to begin, how do we get practical. And this book is an amazing tool at helping us begin. Eve and Peter, would you like to take it from there?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will share some slides in a moment, but first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Linda, because Linda really brought that up, didn't she? This whole idea about people still not quite knowing what to do. And one of the purposes of the book was taking that story that we'd heard many times and then collecting stories from around the world to help with that. But what I would really like to start by doing, Peter and I, you can see, don't have a copy of the book, but someone watching does. So Stephen Palmer, could you actually show us the book, please? I think Stephen, I hope Stephen's there and has a copy in his hand. Yay, thank you. It's nice to know that some people have got it. Well, we know that some people had it a week ago. Peter and I still keep listening out for the front doorbell. Thank you, Stephen, very much for showing it. The book was coordinated by 4 of us. And I just want to say that one of us, one of the people who made that original statement I mentioned right at the start, Linda, who's on the call, Zoe Cohen, and Ali Wybrow. Well, one of those 3 people was involved in the book with us, but sadly died earlier this year. So whenever we talk about the book, we always remember Ali with sadness and with fondness. She died unexpectedly in February. So I'll just share what we're going to do, and hopefully you can see my slides. Ah, good. So what we're going to do is tell you a little bit about how the book works, with the idea being that we wanted to tell it in a way that would really allow people to get involved and feel like they were doing something themselves, listening to stories and doing something on themselves. So it's structured like a journey in 7 days. And the people on this journey are participants in a workshop. And maybe you'd like to take up the story, Peter.
One of the things you need to know about Eve is that she's extraordinarily global and extraordinarily inclusive. She did a great job to make sure we had contributions from 60 plus, well, nearly 70, including the 6 of us originally involved, coaches, poets, leaders right around the world. And it was, how do we make this participative with the reader? And that's why it's written, and it's written so that you can run it as a workshop with colleagues, by yourself, with a peer, and each part involves you as an active participant.
Yeah, and in a second we're going to explain this cycle, and it's the cycle that's used in the Climate Coaching Alliance that I'll talk a little bit more about at the end. And so each day focuses on one part of the cycle and is divided into morning and afternoon sessions. And what we're doing in these stories with the workshop is hearing these stories, as Peter says, from around the world, and then doing loads of experiential exercises, and hearing ideas about approaches and tools. And then people have the opportunity to share feedback and learning and consider what next. And you might say, well, that's difficult because people are reading the book, but actually we've obviously done this before, and we're bringing together what people have fed back and we're incorporating it into the book. So when reading it, it hopefully feels more like it's being spoken as much as you can in a written book anyway. And as Peter said, those stories from around the world. So perhaps, Peter, you would start with the cycle as you first developed it.
Yeah, what we realize is that for all of us, you cannot deal with the ecological crisis as a coach, consultant, leader, just by trying to address it with your left hemisphere neocortex. Modernity has shrunk the whole way we experience and engage with the world, from a whole embodied heart, total brain, right down to feeling we stand outside the world and we look at it and we manipulate it and extract from it. And so we still think of the ecology as something out there and not something that lives in us and we are intimately part of. And so the first thing we have to do is to actually be open ourselves from the narrow blinkers we look at the world to a much bigger way of participating in it. And in the book, we have many stories about different people, different parts of the world, about how they've woken up to not only the climate crisis, but the fact that the ecology is not something out there separate from them. So are you going to talk about the next stage?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I was just thinking, there are people on the call who've written some of the stories very honestly about their own awakenings. And I mean, I have too. And I think the other thing that we're incredibly aware of is that climate change and the ecological crisis doesn't exist as an end product. It's interconnected with so much else. I happen to have Greta Thunberg's new book, and right at the start, it reminds us we need to listen to the science. And we do. We also need to listen to our own hearts. So when you go to the second phase, and we should say that on any day, we might be in any of these places or a number of them on the same day. But in the informed, we're reading, we're looking, we're listening to videos like that beautiful, beautiful video from Drew Dellinger's poem. And so we're listening to nature, we're finding out and understanding what's happening. But we're doing so not just by reading the science, listening to the science, finding out what's going on. As Brian said, it's COP27 and there have been so many reports that are really quite difficult to read. But we're also listening to our heart, we're going out in nature and we're just taking things in, and that comes out in the book when we go on walks in nature where people are encouraged to see a particular animal or to go through time in a particular exercise. And then maybe you'd like to go to the aware part, Peter.
And one of the things that so many people say and report in the book, or many of us experience, is that when we really open up, we very quickly get overwhelmed. We go into shock, we go into grief, some go into denial. And in the eco-aware, it's about how do we deal with all those waves of impact upon ourselves? And how do we notice our own reactions and keep working through them? How do we face the stage of anger and blame of others? Right? It's somebody else's fault, and then come back to take our own inventory. How do we deal when we do get to that, to deal with our own guilt and shame? And if you like, those three phases, awakening and being curious, listening to indigenous people in nature and the science and informed, dealing with all the emotional stuff, which we cannot do alone. We need our colleagues to be constantly challenging ourselves and holding up the mirror to what we are doing and not doing to help us see a bigger perspective. Those three phases are all preparatory to start to become engaged. Right? And how does we have to not just talk about it, but start changing our practice piece by piece by piece? Yeah. If I could just say, we go through a lot of tools of how you can start doing that. And the one that Linda and the others mentioned, and it was brought up beautifully by Gonzalo, is that one of the first ones is, how do you realize there should never be just two people in the coaching room? We have to say, in every piece of work we do in the coaching room, whose voices from the stakeholders, from the future, need to be in the room for us to do this work together. I'm not coaching you. Together, we're facing what the world needs. Your world in your life needs us to be working on. So Eve, do you want to say more about the engaged phase?
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. And I think that is so important because obviously we do have a number of tools, and we look at coaching, we look at supervision, and we look at education and how training could change. And we've done quite a lot of original research as well. But one simple thing we talk about is when we first get together with an individual coachee, client, or a team, how do we contract with them? Who do we talk with them about as the stakeholders to our work? Because actually it's opening up that conversation right at the start, which is a very realistic one. We would say to them, we would talk to them about finances. Why wouldn't we talk to them about what the future might look like and how much that might impact them too? So contracting is really important in stakeholders. But in engagement, we do offer some tools, some examples, some possibilities, some questions, and never forgetting that we have this tool called really deep listening, which is the most wonderful tool of all. And then obviously we go to active, Peter, and that comes in all sorts of forms. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, let me just add to what you said about engage. And absolutely, our ability to listen, but where we have to go beyond the listening just to the individual is how do we listen with and through them with as much empathy for everyone in their story, everyone in their world, and not just everyone as human, but every element of their world, and have as much empathy for and compassion for that as we do for ourselves and the individual we're sitting with. This is a radical way of getting beyond individual-centric and personal development and growth-centric ways of operating. And the final stage is just changing what we do in the coaching room is not enough. And there's already been some great comments, Eve, in the chat box. I'm not sure if you saw them from Liz Gould and Jackie Arnold, with all sorts of suggestions. And indeed, Gonzalo gave us some about how we can, steps we can all take. And in the active phase, we provide a lot of frameworks for you to review your own business. What are you doing? What about your transport? What about your pension? I often say people have more power in their pension than they do in their vote. If you're lucky enough to have a pension in this world. What about all the people as suppliers that you use? What are you doing to take responsibility for what's happening in the professional associations, like the two represented here today and all the others? What are we doing? And this is where Ali Wybrow made a great contribution, and the stuff is in the book that she wrote about what you can do in your own local community and what you can do to influence rather than just blame politicians and blame organizations. What can we do that will make a difference?
And I'd just like to say, one form of active is asking your professional bodies, what are they doing? And then getting involved. And the JGSG is one example of activism at work. And we all have ways to do it. I mean, some people may be very active in, for example, Extinction Rebellion or in Just Stop Oil. Other people may do it through professional bodies, but we all have ways of getting active and we need to find our way. And then I'm just going to say a little bit about the book, and then I will, it is actually published on Monday. And Peter, I don't know if you spotted in the chat box that other people have got their book as well. I'm just getting a bit jealous. And just so you know, for November, there is actually that discount code that will get a 25% discount. And I'm going to put this information into the chat box at the end of this talk. We are going to have two launch events on the 29th of November. They'll be at 0800 GMT and 2000 GMT. And as you'll find with the Climate Coaching Alliance, everything is always free. So if you'd like to find out more about the book and actually go through a journey with some of the contributors, some of the poets present, etc., and also beautifully some of Ali's family doing some of the readings, then please do come along to that. And just to say, this time there are no, the author royalties are going to Stop Ecocide International, which is present at COP27. And there will also unusually be a match donation from the publisher. So Peter, perhaps you'd like to say a little bit more about this, and I'll just put it all up so you can do so.
Yeah, we just thought we'd give you just a sense of, each day takes a different phase of the eco-phase cycle. And each half day is like a workshop that you can do with colleagues. It starts with a name for the collective for writers called the convener, where you're welcomed and told what's the theme for the morning. And then we invite in speakers, leaders, practitioners from around the world, and normally often start with a poem. But then we do get very practical, and we invite you to go off and do certain exercises. I mentioned the ones about reviewing your business, how you can make a contribution in your community. But when we come to this day 4 morning, it's all about what you can do in your practice. So one of the things, for instance, we invite people to go and practice starting a new relationship, because one of the things we discovered from the research Eve and I did is if you do not have the ecology named and present in the first meeting, it becomes harder and harder. So we go very practically about, I give some steps about how, having made some personal and some heart contact with the new person, how I ask them, who and what does your life and work serve? And then I simply say, who else? Who else? We invite all those people into the room. And then I say, so if all those people were here, what would they be saying is the work, including the more than human world and future generations? What is it that what's the work they would be saying you and I need to be doing together? And that way of starting means we're not starting from the person and working up. We're starting from the future and the outside in, and that's with us throughout the whole journey. And I often start new sessions with, and so what's the work the world needs us to be doing today? So we're holding that relational, at the wider sense of ecosystemic relational, there in every session. And then we also hear in each chapter things that different people are doing and different examples. So we've got that multi-voiced place, and we indicate where we invite you to go off, do your reflection, do your work, and then come back with your response. So one of the things we're hoping is that many people will set this up with their own group, whether it's once a week or once a month, and use it as a living process, because one of the things that's become very clear, none of us can do this work alone. Reflection is important, but fellow travelers is even more important. So hopefully this will spark fellow traveling, right? Not just talking about, but action and doing it outside, doing it together, going on one of the exercises is deep time walk, walking the history of as you hear, the history of the earth, which I know some of you have done, but these very powerful consciousness changing processes.
Thank you. And I think, Brian and Will, we should hand back to you, because I think then we'll be bang on time. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eve.
Very much.
Well, would you like to provide a quick wrap up?
Well, what I would love to do is invite people. There's been so much in that sharing from Eve and Peter, which we're so grateful for. I wonder what's landed with you. Will people just put into the chat what has jumped out from you from that bit of dialogue there, thinking about the book, thinking about how we get going? And maybe people could just do that whilst, Brian, you segue into the next piece.
Yes, thank you, Will. Would love to see that feedback, and wonderful, brilliant discussion and brilliant layout of the eco-phase cycle, which we all can use in our coaching engagements, and invite our coachees to join that journey with us. So next, we're going to share with you a video. We're transitioning, as you've seen in the flow of the talk today. We started with personal. How is climate change personally affecting me, and how is that influencing the coaching that I do? And now we're moving into the professional. How can we actually put this into our coaching engagements? So we're going to play a video now from the UN Environment Program, and the video is called "A World of Climate Promises Not Yet Delivered," and it's based on the emissions gap report from 2021. The video was posted on October 26 as 2021, as they were publishing the emissions gap report. And on this one, we invite you to just feel it. It's a powerful video. It's very short. It's a minute, but within that minute, there are a lot of emotions that come. And then you're going to be placed into a breakout room afterwards and asked 2 very important questions. So let me get the video queued up here. As I said, it's a minute in length. And here we go.
Tractor trailer right here!
And as mentioned, that was a year ago, and we all know what has happened in the world this last year since that time, and all of the powerful events that have occurred that are adding to the story and adding to the importance of the work that we do. All right, we're going to invite you into a breakout room now. Will, would you like to set up the breakout room for us?
Fantastic, thank you, Brian. So similar to last time, this is a space for you to now unpack, to reflect, to think a bit about what you've just experienced in that video. And as Peter said, we need to be together. We need to go together to respond to what's going on in the world. You will have 8 minutes in the breakout room. And then after that, we're going to invite you again to put your feedback into the chat. So if you put your thoughts and your reflections that have come from your breakout room into the chat, that will give us an opportunity to read them and then to pick some out that we can invite people to speak to. So we'll have 8 minutes, and the questions for this one are a bit more focused. They are one way. What's one way that I can make my coaching more ecologically conscious? So one way that I can make my coaching more ecologically conscious is, and Brian's going to put these questions into the chat for us. And the other is, one way I could make a difference beyond the coaching room is. So those are the two questions. And
wonderful. And to Liz's point, we are reallocating the breakout rooms to only 5, so you will have more of an opportunity to share.
Brilliant.
Great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. It'll work the same way, where you see the prompt on the screen to join the room, and I hope you have a wonderful discussion.
So if we'll take the floor, right, before I move on, right?
Yes, and you will toss it back to, let's see, after the breakout room. Actually, you toss it back to me for introducing Eve and Anjali.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, breakout rooms will close in 10 seconds. Looks like a couple of folks have come back already, so welcome back. Wait the few extra moments. All right, welcome back from the breakout rooms. Hope you had a wonderful discussion. We're going to invite Charlie on now to lead us through the debrief.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And I will introduce this debrief by saying that the video was very impressive, and I will retain just one sentence that you have at the end of the video. Meanwhile, please write on the chat your insight about your professional response to the climate crisis. And the final word was, the world finally needs to act. And I think this is a call that is addressed to everyone, and then more substantively to all our professional dynamics. So, and I see Brian rewriting on the chat what we are expecting. Please write on the chat what you think about this. And I I will also add that this year, just to give concrete insight, more than 30 million people were displaced in Pakistan. And this should tell us why it is critical for all of us to make sure we can really design a professional response to the climate crisis, not only the personal, because personal will be very local, but now a professional one that will bring us, to think of a collective and dynamic response, to climate change, as the video also expressed it clearly. We can't just be thinking of this response in a local way. We need to think globally, but also to act in a way that will bring kind of global response and bring all this world to see the challenge as a collective challenge. And this also shows the kind of networking that we need among all these professional bodies, not only professional actors or maybe coaching practices, but also our professional bodies. And I think the roundtable that we are holding today is one of the response. And I think we just said that more roundtable will be ahead. So please, do you have your insight to share with us your ways of making your coaching eco-conscious, or also making the difference beyond your coaching room as we talk of it? And Gretan just share with us that all his coaching work is work and talk coaching in nature, either in person or virtually. Inviting people into nature opens them up in so many different ways. And I think this should be, going beyond our coaching room. And that means bringing people out there to see the complexity of the nature that we live in, and also to look at ways to bring more harmony between what we are and what we have to be. And then saying this, I'm thinking of our grandchildren, because tomorrow we have to think of them, just to get back to the first breaking room, because we have nothing to forget, given the harmony of the nature that we live in. So do you have more to share here?
And we can invite you to continue sharing those thoughts in the chat box, because we did want to provide a few minutes here at the end to have Anjali share what we will be doing in the IAC for our members who are on the session, and also for Eve to share about the Climate Coaching Alliance and all of the wonderful opportunities that you have for learning and growth there. So I'll turn it back over to Anjali and Eve.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Anjali, would you like me to say something about the Climate Coaching Alliance first, so that then you can end? And I have put some information into the chat box for you. So I'll just, if I can, I'll put something into the chat box again. The Climate Coaching Alliance started as a meeting between 3 people on November the 14th, 2019, and it's quite a poignant day because it would be our 3rd anniversary on Monday of when we started, and that's of course the day the book comes out, but one of the 3 of us is no longer around. But we started, and we continue in the same way, that it's free to join, and I've put the details in the chat box. We've grown from 3 to over 2,200 people, and what that means, and I've put a link to the communities group, is that there are communities in every language, in different parts of the world, by subject matter, and there's wonderful opportunities to connect with people, to work with the book, but to do things together, because as Peter said, and we've underlined today, it's doing things together where we'll make a difference. And I think the support we need is really important. So I'd like to pass over to you now, Anjali, to close with grateful thanks for working together. It's been wonderful from APECS's point of view.
I resonate that, Eve. Thank you so much. And thanking each one of you for being here, sharing your thoughts, engaging with each other. We really look forward for all of us to meet again in the next roundtable, which is scheduled on 18th of January and hosted by by the EMCC, Commensa, and APECS again. The topic is, as coaches, are we maintaining an unjust system? So, our idea is each of the roundtables actually picks up from where we stopped and builds the story further. And for the IAC members, you're going to hear a lot more from the IAC team. We have a team coming together, and there are going to be a couple of more initiatives very close to what you're experiencing today, and look forward to all of you reaching out in case any of these interest you. I also want to just take a moment. I feel truly grateful, for definitely all of you who's been, I think for the past many days, managing the complete backend, helping with the translations, and each one of us in this room here, I think has contributed immensely to make this happen today. So thank you so much. And over to you, Brian, for wrapping up, and to you, Will, for this incredible moderation. Thank you, Peter, for always inviting possibilities for coaches. And it's so beautiful to have you, Gonzalo, Eve, all of you share your thoughts and the beautiful thoughts that have come from the participants. Over to you, Brian. I think we have just a minute left.
We just have 1 minute left. And one thing one thing that is a tradition in the IAC is we invite everyone at the end to turn their cameras on so we can get your picture of your smiling, wonderful, beautiful faces. So please turn your cameras on, and please share your camera. If you'd like to do a little heart emoji from your reactions, we love to see that as well, so we can capture this wonderful event. And as we're doing that, I'll invite Will to just share some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for doing a wonderful job at keeping us on time and on track, Brian. You've done a great job. Thank you to everyone at the IAC who's done so much of the heavy lifting to ensure that this event has run so slickly and well. And it feels in the spirit of coaching to be thinking, we've gone on this journey, we've thought a bit about what's personal, what's professional, we've connected with one another whilst we've faced the brutal truth, the hard realities, and we've been thinking about what can we do. So let's be thinking about what are we going to do now? What are we going to actually put into action today, before we get out of our seat, before we get out of the door? How are we going to be putting this into practice today? So that's it from me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. And Liz shared in the chat box that this has given her courage and hope. And that's what we had hoped for. So hopefully you leave the session feeling courageous and hopeful. I wish you the absolute best. Let us know how we can help. We are here for you. Be well, everyone.
The International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.